I'm from Revegy, and I would like to welcome you to the latest event in our webinar series. Our topic today is using sales playbooks that align with the buyer's journey. The buyer's journey has been a hot topic as of late, but many companies are still struggling with how to understand the steps that their prospects take and how to better align their sales process to meet their buyers where they're at. Today, we're going to offer some tips and best practices on how to make sure you and your buyer are always on the same page. Before we get started, I'd like to take a minute to review a couple of logistics items. You'll notice in the GoToMeeting platform, you have a pane off to the right. You can always minimize that pane using the orange arrow button so that you can better see our screen. And you can also submit your questions at any time throughout today's event in the questions area of your pane. We will get back to you towards the end of the presentation when we'll be taking Q&A. And if we don't get to your question today, we will email you and make sure that we address any inquiries that you have. Lastly, all attendees who have registered for today's webinar will receive a link to the replay and also the slides so that you can share this content with colleagues and review and refresh as you are beginning to build out and really refine your buyer's journey. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our two presenters today. We have Steve Haberdink, who's our VP of Sales here at Revegy, and also Jennifer Earle, who is our SVP of Sales and Service. Steve is a recognized expert in building and mentoring high-performing inside and outside sales teams with a focus on sales process, planning, and execution. Jennifer is a multifaceted technology leader with more than 20 years of sales training and consulting experience, and she's helped market leaders like the SAS Institute, Oracle, Informatica, and JDA optimize their sales performance and revenue growth. At this point, I'll turn it over to Steve, who's going to introduce the webinar.
Thank you, Kimya, and thank you everyone on the line today for taking some time out of your hectic sales life to join us for our webinar series. Revegy offers monthly topics on critical issues that help B2B sales executives, sales managers, and sales reps keep producing at the top of their game. All of our topics focus on two critical issues: sales planning and sales execution. So just a high-level overview of the agenda today. So Jen and I will be talking through why the buyer's journey is so critical, why all sales playbooks are not equal, how do you determine the buyer's process, how playbooks should drive alignment, of course some major takeaways, and like Kimya mentioned, a time for some questions and answers. So open it up with, why is the buyer's journey so critical? So Jen, as we're looking at this, we want to understand, why is the buyer's journey so critical? Is this just something that Revegy is thinking about, or are there some other interesting facts out there in the market to help us?
Great lead-in, Steve. I appreciate that setup. I thought we'd share with everyone today some information that we keep a very close eye on, and that's the benchmarking and work that's done from CSO Insights. So here today is really the result and really some captivating information from this year's survey completed by CSO Insights of 1,000 companies. And what we thought was interesting to share with you here is that of the deals that are forecasted to close from the responses from these 1,000 companies, 46% actually closed. And of course, that makes all of us in the sales arena very, very sad. And the other critical item that we wanted to share is that of those closed deals, 83% of them that did close, which makes us happy when we talk about those that closed, the interesting piece here is that the products and services that made up those deals were actually not what was forecasted. So again, hate to start out with bad news, but we're going to spend some time today to really talk about why we feel the buyer's journey is so critical and really how it relates to these two startling statistics. But of course, I did share some bad news, but the good news is that, you know, not all companies had poor win rates or such a wide discrepancy in what was forecasted versus what deals closed. So the two factors that stood out in the report for those companies that did not have those significant win rate drops were really these two areas. They shared with CSO Insights that they had implemented a sales process. And this leads to the second point here to our topic today, really, Steve, that we wanted to share with those of you who have joined us today, as well as have some conversation and dialogue at the end, is really that they felt that the reason they did not have those significant win rate drops was that they had a strong understanding of the customer's buying process. So I think that really those good news, bad news, just kind of set the stage for what we wanted to talk about today.
Perfect, thank you. And that second point is something that always jumps out at me, is the understanding of the customer's buying process or that buyer's journey. You know, and one of the things that we've realized in CSO Insights, as well as Serious Decisions in Marketing Sherpa has been doing some research and some studies, is 50% of the buying process is already complete before a sales rep is even engaged. You know, as you guys know, we're making a lot of transitions into a more internet-driven culture, and everything is out there. Those buyers can go out there and do the research and make sure they have the information that they need before they even need to spend the time to engage that sales rep. And because of that, the buyers are getting a majority of the information online, where historically they had to rely on that sales professional to bring them the information that they needed at the right time. And then lastly, what we realize is B2B buyers prefer to receive content unique to their buying stage. And that's a huge statistic. 76% want to get content that's unique to their buying stage. And as you guys are going to see as we work through this, the sales process does not always align with the buyer stage unless you're intentional with that. And then there's some ways to ensure that you have the alignment there. Okay? And then another quote that we have from Forrester, a leading analyst in the technology industry, is buyers might be anywhere from 2/3 to 90% of the way through their journey before they even reach out to a vendor. So everyone on the phone, maybe that gives you a little bit of pause in saying, well, what am I supposed to be doing? Should we just give a bunch of content out there that can help this person buy my software or my services instead of selling it to them? Well, obviously, we all know that the work of a sales professional is to make sure that you're aligning what you can offer and answer the needs of those buying organizations. But how do you do that? You can't just show up and throw up, right? You actually have to make sure you're delivering value the entire time through their buyer's journey. And this isn't just delivering good content. This isn't just showing up and making some interesting value points. You need to understand what do they care about at each moment in their buyer's journey, and what information do you have that's going to be critical, that's going to provide value to their continued process. Half of B2B buyers say they rejected the vendor because they didn't provide value throughout their buyer's journey. They weren't able to figure out how are they going to align with the product or the solution that was being offered to them. And then another interesting stat around this is, you know, not only do we want to make sure we're aligning with that buyer's journey from an overall sales process standpoint, we have to ensure that our sales folks understand how to have these value conversations. Just because you align and you put the information there doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be ready to have that conversation. We want to make sure that that sales team is actually prepared to do that. And then what we saw from some recent surveys by Marketing Sherpas was that of the B2B buyers they surveyed, about 750 different buyers, the perception was that only 29% of the sales reps were adequately prepared for a first sales call. Well, the reason for that is these buyers are more prepared than the sales reps are sometimes because they've been doing their research with all of the information that's out there. And then we all know if you're not well prepared for that first call, the likelihood of getting that second call is slim to none. 7% is the actual stat there. So Jen, all of these statistics we've looked at Does this help us explain why these forecasted deals are not closing?
Yeah, I think not only does it do that, Steve, but I think it really kind of builds the case for why the buyer's journey is so critical. So it might be helpful, because those were some very compelling statistics and information that you shared there, for us just to do a quick summary and just get to the bottom line. It's true, win rates have dropped for forecasted deals, and when we look at the information you just shared, it really comes down to a couple of key points. This is our takeaway, I believe. One is that it's critical to realize that your buyers may be in an active evaluation mode. And here's the other key thing, which I definitely want to spend a little bit of time talking about, is that they, while they're in their active evaluation mode, they actually may not be ready to engage with a sales professional. And this is, I believe, sometimes surprising to some of the folks that we talk to. And if you are the sales professional and you're engaging with your buyers, it's so key to focus on value. And I think that might be one of those words that slightly overused, so we're going to spend some time today talking about what that might mean to all of us that are on the phone and focused on ensuring that we increase our win rates by aligning to our buyer's journey. But when we talk about engaging with our buyers, focusing on providing value, we want to make sure that this includes both the sales professionals and the marketing teams at our organization. And so again, I really think that those are the key three areas, just summary here, and I think it kind of sets the stage for the rest of our conversation.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Jen. So what we want to start to talk through now is, I'm going to guess some of you guys have a sales playbook in place today, or at least a sales process, but we want to help everyone understand why all sales playbooks are not equal. There's differences in sales playbooks. Serious Decisions, a leading analyst in the sales and marketing arena, said, as you require those reps to document the actions they see the buyers taking, that digital playbook, keyword there is digital, can reinforce the alignment of the organization's sales process with the different stages of that buyer's journey. There's a lot of ways to ensure that we're aligning with that buyer's journey. If you're looking at a static piece of paper, you're not going to be able to be fluid and work with them through their process. Where most playbooks have started is by giving the sales team great marketing content that they can finally get in the hands of their prospective buyers. You guys all know marketing gets frustrated because they've created all this wonderful content. The sales team has no idea how to access it at the right time. Who do they give it to? Well, the playbook morphed out of a basic sales process now to be a way for the content to be delivered up at the right time in the sales process. So now Mr. Salesman or Miss Sales Lady can go out there and deliver this information to the prospect at the right time. Well, we've seen playbooks morph and be a little bit more around execution in addition to the content-driven aspect of it. So allowing you then to link to the different sales tools that you may need as you're working through the sales process, whether that means you're mapping out the potential buyers in this deal, working through discovery call information, scorecarding out if this deal makes sense, all the while you have the right content that's going to be served up to you so you can ensure that you're getting that out to the person to align with your sales process. But the key that's missing here is it's not aligned with that buyer's journey. So we want to make sure as we're working through our sales process, it actually aligns with where is the buyer in their journey. Are they past the planning and the research stage? Maybe they're already in the vendor selection and you're just doing some discovery questioning. We want to ensure that throughout this entire process, the sales team is lockstep with the buyer as they're continuing to move through this. That is the key that you need to look for as you're working with your playbooks.
Steve, it's interesting as you talk about the playbooks that are aligned with the buyer's journey, we're getting increased inquiries from our prospects as well as even some of our existing customers as to how to add that element to their playbook that really focuses on the buyer's journey. But the question we always get when we're having conversations is, well, how do I go about determining what my customer's buying process and journey is? Understand it's important. How do I determine that? Well, it's interesting because I'm sure people expect us to provide them with just this incredible, inside secret, this unbelievable piece of sage advice, but really it boils down to ask them. So we, based on a buyer's research study done by People Metrics recently, what they found through their survey is that 80% of the prospects said that they would be willing to give feedback if, and only if, a potential partner asked for it during their buyer's journey. Pretty incredible. But the reason they said that they would do that is that they really felt that this showed a commitment to, guess what, delivering that value beyond the sale that we talked a little bit earlier that was so important. So it made them feel that their sales professional actually cared about their business, and then if they asked them, that they would actually be willing to share with them where they were at in their actual buyer's journey.
Gotcha. Thanks, Jen. And one of the things that we've noticed as well is not only asking them where they are or what's important to them, but it's also understanding what are the verifiable outcomes that you need to line up with that the buyer's going through. Verifiable outcome is, have they issued an RFP? Have they begun to give you executive buy-in? Is there alignment with the stakeholders at the organization? Verifiable outcomes are all around ensuring that you and the prospective buyer are speaking the same language at the right time, and it really aligns that team and allows you to collaborate then on where you are in the process. We want to ensure throughout the entire time as you're working through the buyer's journey, you have all of these different verifiable outcomes available to you, and these are going to be points of collaboration, making sure you're delivering value as you're working through this process. And then obviously it's not just about asking good questions. It's not just about ensuring that you have collaboration there. It's getting back to making sure every interaction is valuable. You can be the most responsive sales rep in the world. Every time your potential customer asks you for something, making sure you get it back to them right away. Or maybe you're extremely prepared and you know all your marketing collateral in the industry in and out. When you show up for a meeting, you're ready to go. Perfect. But we know we have to add some additional things to that. We have to be willing and ready to listen. As we're working through this process, you've already started asking this prospect questions about where they are in the buyer's journey. What are they looking to do with this new solution or with this project that they're bringing in? Understanding where they are, asking those questions, bringing your knowledge to bear, not only in the industry, but maybe even specifically how other customers have worked through a similar process, and then bringing those insights to help your new prospect through their buyer's journey. That's a critical success factor to make sure you're delivering value as you're continuing to work through this entire process.
So you know what, Steve, you know how I love a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I would actually share really a kind of a personal Revegy story here, just to bring some of the information we've been talking about to light. So this information that I have here on the slide is really the key elements of a story about one of our own customers at Revegy. So we actually, when we were fortunate enough to win the business with them, we actually took time through our win-loss analysis with them to really take a look at and ask questions around their actual buyer's journey. And here's a recap or a summary really of what they shared with us, of what it looked like for them when they were evaluating Revegy as well as other potential solutions, and then what ultimately led them to purchasing the solution from us. So, and intermingled in here is also some feedback that they actually provided us on how well we did as an organization in our alignment. So they're a company that's focused on the software and services industry that provides to the insurance industry, excuse me. And so these were really kind of the three key areas that they felt outlined and explained what they were, from a buyer's journey, the journey they were on when they looked to evaluate solutions. So first of all, they did a ton of research. So I'm reading left to right here. So they shared with us that before they ever spoke to anyone at any of the potential companies that they were looking to purchase a solution from, that they had actively attended They said between 2 and 3 webinars, some of those hosted by us with our analysts, some hosted by other companies that provided solutions that they were looking at. They also shared that they did an immense amount of internet research. They also were very involved in the Sales Management Association, other analysts in the space. They availed themselves of the knowledge of those analysts, the information that they shared as well out about the available solutions to solve their problems. And so during this research phase, they said that, you know, they really didn't want to engage with the sales rep at this point from any of the organizations. They were busy, they knew exactly what they wanted to evaluate, and they wanted to actually spend that time gathering their information. So we asked them, give us a score, how do we do? And give us some feedback around this research stage. And what they shared with us is they said that they gave us a high score in this area because we actually had an individual from our inside sales team reach out to them based on a webinar registration, and he was very upfront and said, look, I'm not ready to engage. Here's where I'm at in the research and what the next steps I'm going to take. And he said they were very respectful of that. But he did say this, and I thought this was interesting. He said while they were very respectful of his decision to really continue on his research page, he did say that the Revegy inside sales team was very proactive in staying in touch, but more from a standpoint of is there other information that you need? And he shared with us that that was not something that he had experienced with other vendors and other solutions. So we were happy to hear that we got a good mark in that, and also really happy to hear some of the information to help us understand what companies are doing, as you said earlier, a good deal of it before they ever engage with a vendor. So once they moved through that research phase, then they actually began to make some good decisions about who they wanted to engage with. They had collected the information, evaluated internally, and then they began to reach out and engage with outside sales professionals to actually do what we are all very used to doing, is validating that the product and solution met their needs around capabilities and so forth, and then that demo process began. But because they were very clear on where they were at in their buyer's journey, and because they had done extensive research, one of the other things that they had done is that they had gone up the ladder in their organization and received approval to actually make the decision, because internally at their company they were very clear about the evaluation process, exactly what that team was doing and looking at, and so they were empowered so that they could keep the process simple. And some of the feedback that they gave us is that we were, again, respectful of that process. They did say that we were a little concerned about the fact that he said, no, I'm the one making the decision. And I know for all of us on the sales side of the business, we're constantly asking, do we have the right people aligned with us and it can actually make the final decision? So he said we were a little surprised when he told us that, yes, the decision kind of stopped with him. But he said we were proactive. He said we were well prepared when we actually engaged with them, and he said that was very important to him because we were delivering value. And so when he brought other people from the organization to look at the capabilities demo, he felt that that time was very well spent, and that we actually proactively addressed things like, yes, we have a solution, here's what it's going to take to implement that solution, and that we also brought in additional people at Revegy at the right time. So he didn't feel as though when he engaged with us that we had 20 people on the call for him, but that we had subject matter experts available at the right time. So again, we did receive some high marks there, but I think one of our learnings from this piece right here around the vendor demo buyer process was that we found it hard to believe that we weren't going to have to go through a formal approval process, because that's what we were used to. And so I would say an area of improvement that we walked away from is to ask the right kinds of questions so we can and feel comfortable that we've validated and have the right kind of verifiable outcomes to move to the next stage. And then the last thing that he shared with us is in their buyer process, the final stage was to build a business case, which is no surprise here. But what he did share with us is that we helped him by providing him with the appropriate information when he asked for it, and that he then was able to do a final comparison of the solutions and deliver the right kind of internal business case needed internally. So just a little bit of information around their buyer's journey, how we ranked and what kind of score we got from one of our own customers who today has implemented the solution, but also some learnings on our side of our takeaways. And then just kind of most folks like to know, well, what's next for them? And one of the things he shared with us that I just thought might be interesting to the folks that are on the phone is that they continue to look at their buyer's journey and determine if they need to tweak it or if they need to make any changes to it. And he said that one of the things that they're currently doing right now is working with their internal sales and product marketing teams, because they've realized that they actually sell into different segments, and they're starting to see that some of those segments of the industry may have slightly different buyer's journeys themselves. And so this is going to be kind of their phase 2, and they're actually planning on utilizing the Revegy solution to help them build some playbooks to address their buyer's journeys with their customers or potential customers, and based on segments. So I think, one of the things we do here internally at Revegy, like I'm sure a lot of folks do here on the phone, is that we're constantly evaluating how well we're doing and scorecarding ourselves. And so I thought I'd just share, this is a list we came up with internally of kind of a do's and don'ts, call it a cheat sheet if you will, to see if we're aligned with our buyers. So I just thought I would share this with you. So on the left, we've got some of those do's. So just to recap, as Steve had mentioned, asking those open-ended questions, really seeking to understand, using those verifiable outcomes in your sales process to validate that you understand where they're at on their journey, and then continue to check for alignment. And then the don'ts, probably no surprises in this list, but some things that we all can be guilty of sometimes. Don't make assumptions or put words in their mouth, or attempt to conform your sales process, or their buyer's journey rather, to your sales process. And then also don't assume that the buyer's journey may not take some detours, because after all, we are all living in the real world.
Thank you, Jen. And so what we want to talk through here is how that playbook should drive that alignment. A lot of the things that you heard Jen talk about in that example, in the do's and don'ts as well, the sales team was constantly working through and wrestling with, hey, this deal doesn't seem right. We may be out of control. Here's what my sales process looks like, or a standard sales process may look like. This is what I, as a salesperson, am going to be working through to ensure that I'm going to bring this deal to closure. Well, a couple things you don't see here. There's no buyer's journey. There's no verifiable outcomes. The only thing I care about is what I have to do. There's not a good way to seek alignment in this process. What we want to make sure that you can do is you can align with that buyer's journey. So how are you actively working with this prospective customer or this customer in aligning with the part of the buying stage that they're at the right time? So you have your sales activities that align with particular parts of the buyer stage, but again, collaboration is key. So you're looking for ways to ensure that you're lined up with that buyer at the right time.
Steve, a question we often get, and I think this is a great spot just to maybe stop for a moment and ask this, is a lot of questions that we receive from our customers when we're working with them to add that buyer's journey to their sales process, as illustrated here, is that one of the questions we often get is, if you add the buyer's journey, like we've done here, does it actually change how you execute your sales or your planning process? Once you've determined your buyer's journey, do you need to change or look at your own sales process? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. And you may have to. You may have to bring in different portions into your sales process you didn't have before. That's where we typically see the verifiable outcomes come in, to ensure that not only is your sales process focused on the activities that you have to do as a sales professional, but also is focused on what does your buyer need to verify with you as you're working through this process. And also understanding you don't have to have a rigid process that everybody's got to follow every single time. Make sure you're aligning with how that buyer is looking to buy and understanding how that works. So really the key, as you see at the bottom of this, is those verifiable outcomes that are circled are going to be aligning with different stages in the buyer's process, which all should be lockstep with the activities that the sales team is working through in the sales process.
You know, real quick, one last question about that, Steve, is that you mentioned that you know, verifiable outcomes help kind of keep you on track, and that not every sales process is exactly a linear situation. That's really something else I get asked about a lot, is that folks will say, well, if we're aligned with the buyer's journey and we're constantly looking to seek alignment with the buyer, and they're doing a lot of that work up front, like you mentioned earlier, a lot of their research work, and they're engaging us later than we're used to, is how do we make sure we don't lose control of the sales process? Because, you know, when you're in a sales professional and you're on a sales team, you're constantly being asked, where is the deal? When should we expect this to successfully close? What are those indicators? So how do we make sure that we still have some control if we're focused on alignment?
Yeah, no, Jen, that's a great question. I think that's where the value comes to the table, asking those open-ended questions. You know, the do's and the don'ts that you looked at earlier, seeking to understand where they are in their buyer's journey, and then making sure that your sales process is aligned with that buyer's journey, and you're asking them all the right questions, and you're constantly collaborating with this customer about the process, not just pushing through. And if they don't have an answer for something, understanding why don't they have an answer for that. Maybe they don't need to do that in their buyer's process. Maybe a stage that you have in your sales process isn't important to them in the ecosystem or in their the culture of their company. So constantly collaborating with that customer and understanding, really, we're not trying to control the situation as much as we are trying to ensure that it is a win-win at the end of the day. Aligning your sales process with that buyer's journey is going to ensure that, and you're going to be bringing those deals to closure much more often and much more quickly.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that.
So a couple things that you want to be avoiding as you're working through here. So not only do you not feel like you are losing control, but also to ensure that there's no misalignment. And so here's some things that can happen. If you are misaligned, some of the things that we've seen happen before and we've heard our customers talk about is you may be feeding the competition information through the prospect. Maybe you're helping somebody else gain the edge because you're doing either some after-the-fact education, you're not where they need to be. Ensuring that you're that business expert is really key as you're working with this customer on the buyer's journey. Obviously, we've talked about this already multiple times, inaccurate forecasting and missed numbers. You want to make sure that you're aligned with that buyer's journey so you're bringing these deals in on time and on forecast. And like we've talked about multiple times, you're giving that prospect content that they don't really need. You know, the example that Jen referenced earlier, this company had done all types of research already, and we didn't need to do the standard education that's typically done in an early stage deal. All of that was already there. So no reason to send the same information over and over again. And because they've done their research, they were able to educate the additional people inside the organization. And then that helps us be raised up to a strategic partner instead of a tactical vendor. So you really want to make sure that you're constantly aligning to that buying process as you're working through your sales process. So a couple takeaways and a brief summary about what we've talked about today is it's a two-way street. Collaborate. Make sure that you're constantly having conversations and you're collaborating with your customers, with your prospects as you're working through the sales process, ensuring that you're aligned with their buyer's journey. Ask, listen, discuss. Don't just talk. Don't just tell them what they need to know. Figure out where they are. Listen to them. Be coachable from a prospect to a vendor standpoint. Make sure you guys can actually listen up to what they're saying, and then that gives you the ability to add value at every step during the journey. Like we mentioned earlier, avoid those rigid rules and allow for some flexibility in your sales process to ensure that you can be working with this buyer through their buyer's journey. Instead of pushing them the entire time, working with them and collaborating. And then, of course, be prepared to change course with the customer as needed. Sometimes they may not have everything happen the way you're used to it happening. Make sure that your sales process allows the sales team to work through some of those changes. And then last of all, don't be a control freak. We all know what that can be like in sales. We're usually type A personality. We want things to work a certain way. Align with that buyer's journey. You're going to realize more often than not, you're in more control if you bring these behaviors in and you align your sales process with that buyer's journey. And at the end of the day, it's a much better situation for both you and your new customer.
Thanks, Steve. I hope that this information was of value to those folks who joined us today. And I just wanted to take a quick second to do a very brief introduction of those of you who may not know Revegy. So our technology helps make sales planning and execution happen. So we really pride ourselves here at Revegy for providing intelligent sales playbooks that we spoke about today, as well as what we believe are those critical collaboration tools that really help sales management and sales teams develop strategic account plans, execute on actual opportunities, build effective territory business plans, and also channel partner plans that will really drive revenue growth. So our clients represent some of the leading sales organizations, both big and small, and these logos that I'm sharing with you today are just, represent a few of those customers. So again, just brief introduction, brief commercial, and Kimya, I'll pass the baton back to you to see if we have any questions as promised.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jen and Steve. That was super informative, and I do see there are a lot of questions out there. So before we jump into the Q&A portion of our webinar today, I just want to let you all know that as thanks for spending your time with us today, we are actually going to be offering a copy of the CSO Insights 2015 Sales Management Optimization Study. This is a study that CSO Insights does annually and really looks into things spanning from performance to planning to account management, and it's a $500 value, but of course, as our thanks for you taking time out of your busy schedules, we want to make sure that you're able to benefit from that research and those insights. And you'll see a landing page there where you can go and download it immediately. We will also include this link in our follow-up content, which is going to have a link to the replay and to the slides as well, so that you can always go back and reference this material. So just a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, in your right-hand pane under your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see the questions tab. If you just expand that, you can type your question in and we will take those verbally. So I'm going to start off. It looks like Patricia has a question for Jen and Steve. Patricia says, so many companies have different buyers involved in a single deal. How do you accommodate for the committee approach?
Sure. So thanks, Patricia, for that question. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And what we do here at Revegy is we typically will have part of the sales process be building out what we call an influence map or a relationship map, and ensuring that you know, first of all, who all those buyers are. You know what their level of influence is inside the organization, as well as their preference towards you as an organization or towards your product offering, the strength of the relationship that you have, and of course, who's responsible to be managing that relationship. And then it ensures that you have a plan in place to go and increase the value of those relationships, whether that be through the content that you have or just making sure that you're aligning to the things that matter to that particular person.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. And we've got a question from Gary. Gary says, you mentioned avoiding being aware of buyer journey detours. Can you describe what some of these might be?
That's a good one. The good old detour. I think we see some key ones that will pop up that you really kind of need to think through and be prepared and not surprised. Some of those are top of mind for me is acquisition or divestiture. So you're working with a potential customer, you've aligned and believe you understand their buyer's journey, and you feel pretty good that you're asking those open-ended questions, you've got a good dialogue going along, and then you get the phone call, the email, or maybe radio silence. We all love radio silence. And what you find either through that exchange of information when you're able to connect with them is that a momentous event has happened, like an acquisition. Some companies are able to recover quickly. We found that from some of that because the major players don't change. Could be a detour. Others, though, however, there's management or control changes, and it really sometimes means starting back and revisiting some of those key steps in their buyer's journey. Sometimes it means a complete stall until everyone can figure out simple things like who they report to and whose budget it's now going to come from. So that's a key detour that I think about that comes up quite a bit. Steve, what else have you seen from a detour perspective?
So another detour that we oftentimes see, Jen, is, and people may not think of this as a detour, they may think of it more as just we lost the deal to no decision, but it's no budget was approved. You know, maybe this is something that the organization was talking about for quite some time. This was a project that was started. They're doing all the research. They're getting things going. They're excited. At the end of the day, for whatever reason it may be, that budget didn't actually get approved. And so now obviously their buyer's journey or their buyer's process is going to stall out or take a detour there. And you may have to go back and restart, similar to what you did in the acquisition situation, stall for a second, or it may go away, unfortunately, as well.
You know, that reminds me of another one, Steve. When we talk about detours, and especially around budget, one of the things that we'll often see as a detour is that there are industry or outside influences that affect the buyer's journey. So let's say that the budget has been approved, that the buyer's journey is completely understood internally at that organization, and things are on track. You have alignment with that buyer's journey, and then something happens. And it could be that a competitor of theirs has made a significant move. It could be that there has been a drop in stock price or earnings. Were not reported as planned, and there's a shift of priorities internally within the organization. So I know our sales team, Steve shared with you that they use the relationship map that's inherent in the Revegy sales planning and execution tools. Another map that our sales team uses extensively is the value map, which outlines exactly what the customer's key business requirements are, what their pains are around not being able to achieve those key business requirements, and then also it kind of notes out and says if they were able to achieve it, what type of business impact would it have on their business. And one of the things that the Revegy tool allows our internal sales team to do is to align those buyers and that committee that you may be facing with each one of those key business requirements. So when there are outside influences, as well as things that we talked about in terms of non-budget approval, shift in priorities, that they're able to have a vehicle of communication with their potential buyer about what has changed, who is now focused, is this key business requirement still a priority, has something else shifted? And that serves as both a communication vehicle, but also as a way to kind of readjust where you're at in your sales cycle.
Okay, great. And then we have got, Kelly is asking, can you share any tips on asking the customer for help with their journey without seeming too needy or burdening them?
Great question. And boy, that needy salesperson, always trying to get somebody else to do their job for them. Kelly, that's a great question, actually. And you do have to be careful about that. But the key is you're not consistently peppering this prospect or this customer with questions. You're actually providing value with them as they go through the process. And you're weaving it into conversation. You're making it a conversational approach. You're asking them about their business, what types of needs that they have, and you're allowing them to share the information as opposed to interrogating them throughout the process. It's a skill set that has to be developed over time, but I think a lot of the folks on the phone probably understand how to make that collaborative effort and make it so it's not quite so in your face with that prospect as you're going through there.
Yeah, I always say, the last thing I want to hear when I'm the buyer is someone tell me what they need to do on their end that will allow them to work through their process. So when people say, hey, I need to get on the phone and have a discovery call with you, I know as a potential buyer, have that sinking feeling in my stomach that, oh no, this doesn't mean I'm going to have to answer the same set of questions that I just answered with someone else. So I think that's very good advice, Steve, to kind of weave it in and also make sure that you're capturing information as they're sharing it with you.
Great, thank you, thank you. And I'm just going to take one last question here, and then we'll wrap up. Just a reminder, if we have not gotten to your question, we will email you and make sure that that we address your inquiry. But the last question I've got here says, we don't have a buyer's journey aligned with our sales process. How can we get started? Any tips we can share there?
That's a good one. How do you get started? And I think the key there is get started. So, don't try to do the whole thing or feel that you have to have the perfect buyer's journey, but just get started. And I think if it were me, I would probably, first step is that I would make sure if I'm on the sales side of the organization, I would align with my marketing organization. And, we all know that our marketing organizations are constantly focused on things like buyer personas. They're constantly looking at how long a lead stays in each stage of the sales cycle. They're also evaluating campaigns. And I just think all of that information is absolutely critical. So if you're on the sales side, align with marketing. If you're on the marketing side, align with sales. Because I really think that if you're on the marketing side, that you really need to understand the stories from the road, if you will, what's really happening on the street from your sales team. So that would be one of the first things I would do, is just do that alignment between those two key groups. The other thing I would do is I would really take a look at my funnel, my pipeline funnel. And I dig into it a little bit. If you have some metrics around how long a prospect stays in each stage of your sales cycle, I would use that information, dig into the pipeline, and see if there are deals that are stalled in a certain stage, because I think that may be a good indicator that you may have some potential misalignment between you and your buyers. So I'd align with marketing and sales. I dig into that pipeline funnel. I'd also review the win-loss analysis. And I think if you're not doing win-loss analysis, even though there will be a collective groan across your sales organization, I'd strongly recommend that you implement it. If you're already doing it, I would just take a quick review of that and look to see through that win-loss analysis if there's any new behavior, if there's any new information that your customers or your non-customers have shared with you about how I were either able to win the deal, or any barriers or tactics to win that led to a loss. So I'd really take a look at that information. I think it's key. And so what I say, align with sales and marketing teams, dig into your pipeline funnel, review your win-loss analysis. Oh yes, and then that piece of sage advice we shared a little bit earlier is ask your prospects, ask your buyers.
Awesome. Great. Well, again, we just want to thank you all for joining us today and for spending some time with us. And we hope that you found this webinar to be valuable and that you were able to take some of the key points that we made away to help you align your buyer's journey with your sales process. We will be sending out a follow-up and some wrap-up content along with a link to that complimentary CSO Insights report. If you do have any questions, please feel free to visit our website at www.revegy.com. We actually have a library of great content and resources, including some sales playbook checklists that might be helpful for you in the meantime, and we look forward to connecting with you soon. Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of your week.